You think you can cook better than me? Damon Lore scoffed, glass of wine in hand, as the laughter around the rooftop table swelled. If anyone here can beat my dish at the event next week, I'll marry them on the spot. He raised his glass to a chorus of elite chuckles, not even glancing at the janitor quietly emptying the trash bins 10 feet away. Mara Delaney didn't flinch. She tied the bag, straightened her spine, and looked out over the skyline from the shadows of the rooftop. "Careful, Mr. Lore," she murmured softly. "Some promises can cost more than a ring." No one heard her, but they would. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. Because when "if you can cook better than me, I'll marry you" hits its turning point, you're going to want to see Damon's face. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. Her shift officially ended an hour ago. But one of the newer hires had forgotten to clean the executive terrace. Again. Mara volunteered without complaint. She always did. Damon Lore wouldn't have recognized her if he tripped over her. Good. That was the plan. 9 floors below, her daughter Ella was curled up in the staff lounge, wrapped in a blanket with her sketchpad open, drawing something. Probably another fantasy restaurant with names like Mama's Kingdom or The Velvet Fork. Ella believed in magic. Mara believed in long hours, humility, in silence. But tonight, the air had a taste to it, like something simmering beneath the surface, ready to boil over. The rooftop was trimmed with imported cypress hedges and warm glow fixtures that cost more than Mara's car. Wine glistened in tall crystal flutes. Silver cutlery gleamed under chandeliers shaped like frozen fireworks. The tablecloths were ironed by people who'd never be invited to sit at those tables. And yet here she was, sweeping crumbs, clearing glasses, ghosting past men who'd paid to feel powerful. Damon Lore sat at the head of it all. Custom Tom Ford suit, platinum tie bar, Rolex glinting like a lighthouse warning ships not to approach. He wasn't cruel with his words, just loud enough to be overheard by the right people, and dismissive enough to remind everyone of their place. When someone mentioned the upcoming Cook for a Cause gala, Damon smirked like a boy being dared. "It's only fair I compete," he said, patting his stomach. "Chef said I've got the knife skills of a seasoned pro." A brunette with perfect posture laughed too hard. "And if someone beats you?" "If?" He raised an eyebrow. "Tell you what, if anyone cooks better than me, I'll marry them." Someone else shouted, "Even her," and pointed toward Mara's direction with a cruel smile. Damon didn't even look, especially her. The laughter hit hard. Mara didn't flinch. She didn't bow her head. She placed the last wine bottle into the bin and wheeled it toward the service elevator. But before she stepped inside, she turned just slightly, just enough to see the skyline one more time, and to whisper the same thing she told herself every night. "You're not done yet." Not until she eats like royalty again. Because this wasn't about pride. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the moment her daughter stopped asking for French toast with rosemary syrup and started pretending cereal was her favorite. Mara used to serve people who flew in on private jets just to taste her butter reduction. Now she served people who mocked her for serving. Where are you watching from? I hope it's somewhere warm, somewhere humble, somewhere that reminds you we're all one meal away from remembering who we really are. Damon Lore thought he made a joke, but what he actually did was sign up to be remembered. And that's the problem with men who run the world from glass towers. They never look down. The hallway outside the executive elevator always smelled like citrus and polish, a scent that clung to Mara's skin long after she'd gone home. She stood alone in the elevator now, the trash cart beside her, watching the floor numbers tick down one by one. Her reflection in the mirrored panels looked tired, pulled hair, loose-fit uniform, skin slicked with the sweat of a long shift. But her eyes were steady. They always were. Down in the service corridor, the world was different. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering in one corner. The walls bore faint scrapes from carts and boots, and the scent of bleach replaced the cloying polish. This was where people worked, where people like her existed. Mara clocked out, stashed her name tag, and walked to the lounge where Ella waited. Her daughter was half asleep on the couch, sketch pad slipping from her fingers, a pencil still tucked behind one ear. The pages were filled with neatly drawn tables, candles, and dishes labeled in crayon. Lemon garlic trout, crispy duck legs, Mama's creamy mushroom pasta. Mara smiled and tucked a loose curl behind Ella's ear. She'd never told her daughter who she used to be. It was easier that way, cleaner. Ella just thought her mother liked making food sound fancy when she cooked at home. "Mama," Ella mumbled, eyes still closed. "Do you think they'd let me cook at the event too?" Mara knelt beside her. "Why would you want to?" "So I can beat Mr. Lorry," Ella said sleepily. "He talks too much." Mara's laugh was soft and sharp, like a note held back. She gathered Ella's things and lifted her gently, the girl's head resting against her shoulder as they made their way to the staff entrance. The night outside was still warm, summer clinging to the air. Their old sedan waited in the corner of the lot under a flickering light. The drive home was quiet, except for the hum of the tires and Ella's soft breathing. Mara kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting protectively on her daughter's small backpack. That night, while Ella slept, Mara pulled a worn recipe book from the top shelf of the kitchen cabinet. It still smelled faintly of smoke and thyme. The pages were covered in handwritten notes, many of them in a rushed script that wasn't hers. She paused on a dog-eared page near the back. Vegetable confit with balsamic glaze. A dish she hadn't made in 8 years. The next morning, the hotel buzzed with preparations. Staff bustled through corridors, adjusting floral arrangements, confirming guest lists, and polishing silver trays. Damon Lorry strode through the lobby like a man rehearsing a coronation. His assistant trailed behind, tablet in hand, listing deliveries and RSVPs. "Tell the PR team I want my segment to close the competition," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "We'll build suspense." "And the staff entries?" his assistant asked. Damon waved a dismissive hand. "Let them go first. We'll get their little casseroles and soup bowls out of the way early." In the housekeeping break room, someone had pinned the official event flyer to the bulletin board. It listed the competition schedule by division: executive, guest chef, support staff. And there, under the support staff entrance column, was a name that hadn't been there yesterday: Mara Delaney. She stood in the doorway, lunch bag in hand, staring at the list. Someone behind her whispered, "She's actually doing it?" "She doesn't stand a chance," another voice murmured. "Did you see Damon's kitchen? It's got a salamander broiler flown in from Italy." Mara ignored them. She stepped forward, added her name neatly to the sign-up sheet beneath the flyer, and walked to her locker without a word. Lucia Tran, the hotel's events coordinator, stood near the corner with a clipboard and a curious expression. She'd watched the entire scene, watched Mara's steady hand, her lack of hesitation. Something about it stirred a strange sense of déjà vu. That night, after most of the staff had gone home, Mara stayed behind in the staff kitchen. She opened the hotel's storage pantry with the backup key and studied the ingredients available. Not much, but she knew how to make magic out of nothing. She always had. She worked in silence, peeled vegetables with the edge of a dull knife, roasted roots in an old convection oven. mixed a balsamic glaze from basic stock and brown sugar. She plated carefully, elevated, clean, restrained. She used the back of a spoon to smear sauce across a simple, white dish with more grace than the plating team on the executive floor. Lucia passed by the kitchen window on her way out. She stopped, eyes narrowing as she watched Mara tilt the dish, then shift the garnish half an inch. She knew that move. She'd seen it before. At Livray. Lucia didn't say anything, but the clipboard she carried trembled ever so slightly in her hand. The next morning, Damon Lore arrived at the hotel's executive lounge in a cobalt suit and crisp, white collar, basking in the echo of his own charm. A tray of imported croissants and espresso waited by the glass wall, overlooking the city. The skyline was his favorite backdrop. It reminded him of what he'd conquered. He was mid-laugh when his assistant entered, tablet clutched to her chest like it was breaking news. "She signed up," the assistant said. Damon blinked. "Who?" "Mara, the janitor." The room fell quiet for a beat too long. Then Damon scoffed, turned back to the mirror behind the bar, and adjusted his cufflink. "Let her. It'll be good PR." "She's serious," the assistant said. "She was practicing last night. Lucia saw her." He waved the comment away, but his voice tightened. "The mop queen wants to play chef? Let her try. People love an underdog story, especially when it ends in failure." Downstairs, in the service wing of the hotel, Mara Delaney wiped down the break room counter. The flyer still hung on the board, her name now circled in red marker by someone overnight. Beside it, someone had written in permanent marker, "Guess we're having mop water stew." Mara didn't react. She peeled the paper off the wall, folded it carefully, and placed it into her coat pocket. Ella had asked her that morning why she looked so calm. "Because they already made up their minds," Mara had said. "So whatever I do now is only for us." Word spread fast. In the elevators, in the staff kitchen, through murmured conversations in linen closets and pantry corridors. The janitor was going to cook against Damon Lore himself. Some laughed, some whispered bets, but a few, those who had worked long enough to know silence hides more than incompetence, just watched. Lucia Tron was one of them. She stood beside the events team on the 14th floor, scanning logistics for the charity gala, seating charts, nameplates, wine pairings. But her thoughts kept circling back to the image from the night before. Mara plating that dish, fingers calm, eyes calculating, with no audience but the humming freezer behind her. By lunchtime, the staff cafeteria buzzed like a rumor mill. Damon Lore walked through unannounced, flanked by his assistant and two donors doing a pre-gala tour. He smiled as he passed the prep line, the dishwashers, the pantry window. Then he stopped beside Mara, who stood at the sink rinsing vegetables for the lunch salad bar. "Miss Delaney, isn't it?" he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I hear you're entering our little contest. That takes spirit." Mara didn't turn. She kept washing the radishes, letting the cold water slip across her hands like it wasn't trying to carry anything away. "I'm looking forward to your dish," Damon continued, placing a palm on the stainless steel counter beside her. "But let's not forget, this is a competition for charity. Don't take it personally when your stew doesn't clear the first round." There was a silence that followed. Not hostile, not loud, just long enough for someone at the back of the kitchen to stop moving. Mara finally turned to face him. "Mr. Lore," she said, voice even, "I've served thousands of people who never tasted a thing but still smiled. I won't be one of them. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a boast, just a fact." And for some reason, it unsettled him more than if she'd shouted. After he left, The kitchen wasn't quite the same. Jokes died halfway through. Looks lingered too long. The dishwasher, a kid named Nico, who usually cracked eggs with one hand and a beatbox rhythm, quietly handed Mara a spare knife that hadn't lost its edge yet. She nodded once, said nothing. That night, at home, Ella sat at the kitchen table, drawing again. This time, she had labeled the tiny restaurant sketch, "The Rooftop Queen." Mara sipped tea, watching the kettle steam. "Why that name?" Ella didn't look up. "Because that's where they laughed. And that's where they'll remember you." It was strange, the way the words sat in Mara's chest. Not like pride, and not like fear. Something in between. Something that pulsed. The next morning, the hotel sent out a press release. Headline: CEO enters cook-off with staff to raise funds for local orphanage. Subheadline: Unlikely rival emerges from within, hotel janitorial team. Mara read it in the break room before her shift. Eyes narrowing at the phrase, unlikely rival. She folded the paper in half and set it aside. Someone had already written LOL across the margin. She went back to her mop, but her mind was elsewhere. She could feel it now. Not the eyes, the weight of expectation. They wanted her to fall. Some, silently, wanted her to rise. She didn't care. All she wanted was for Ella to see what her mother could still do. The event flyers were everywhere now. On the guest elevators, in the staff cafeteria, slipped into each room's welcome folder. Cook for a Cause Gala was printed in elegant gold foil, with Damon Loray's face front and center, fork in hand, smile perfectly measured. Just beneath the polished grin was a small square that read, featuring a surprise entrant from our own staff. No mention of her name, no credit, just a novelty to keep the rich entertained. Mara passed one of the posters on her way to clean the penthouse suite. She paused for only a moment, took in the poster, then kept walking. On the top floor, the penthouse kitchen was in disarray. Pans left soaking in the sink, open bottles of expensive oil littering the counter, a trail of crumbs leading to the marble-topped island. The private chef had cooked a test run for Damon's gala dish and left without cleaning up. Mara stepped over a discarded towel, set down her supplies, and got to work. The room smelled of garlic, truffle, and ego. Every movement she made was quiet, precise, practiced. She cleaned in the rhythm of someone who had once ruled kitchens, like this. Halfway through wiping down the backsplash, she noticed a stack of index cards near the espresso machine. Handwritten, in Damon's blocky scrawl, dish, Wagyu tartare, you smoked quail egg, presentation, height per drama, gold flakes, subtle, not gaudy. Finish, ice bowl, dry ice mist, check temp safety. Mara read it without emotion. It was a performance, not a dish. She understood now. He wasn't trying to feed people. He was trying to impress them. She finished the job, left the kitchen cleaner than she found it, and returned to the service elevator with the quiet grace of someone who knew more than she ever let on. Down in the staff hallway, Nico and two other kitchen hands were arguing about their own entries for the gala. Nothing serious, just a fun side event for staff to feel included. A fried chicken plate, a spicy ramen. Nico was even testing out a mango lime aioli. "You entering, Mara?" one of them called out. She nodded once. Nico gave a nervous chuckle. "Cool, cool. What are you making?" "I haven't decided yet," she said. They looked at each other, unsure if she was being coy or honest. Later that evening, Lucia Tran stood at the edge of the ballroom with a clipboard in hand, directing staff where to place the floral centerpieces. The gala was 2 days away, and the space was transforming fast. Marble floors buffed to glass-like shine, Chandeliers dimmed to warm candlelight tones. Tables dressed in midnight blue silk, with crystal napkin rings shaped like leaves. But she wasn't looking at any of that. She was watching Mara. Across the ballroom, Mara was quietly stacking extra linens into a cabinet, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a small ink mark still visible on her wrist, an old burn scar shaped like a half moon. Lucia had seen those same marks on line chefs. Not from accidents, from speed, from muscle memory, honed over years. She scribbled something on her clipboard. Then, as if deciding something private, walked away. That night, back in her apartment, Mara stood in front of her open refrigerator. She wasn't looking for ingredients. She was looking for memories. Leftover rice, one onion, a lemon, a nearly empty bottle of balsamic. That's what she'd started with, once. She remembered the exact year. She'd cooked for a table of 6 judges, one of whom had been skeptical before even sitting down. And yet, her risotto with lemon-glazed roots had silenced the entire room. She didn't need caviar or wagyu. She needed balance, texture, depth. Ella sat at the kitchen table, stringing paper flowers for school. "Are you going to beat him?" she asked without looking up. "I'm not cooking to beat him." "Then why are you cooking?" Mara thought about that for a long moment. To remind myself what I didn't forget. The day before the gala, Damon entered the executive kitchen with a camera crew and a PR handler. He made a show of tasting sauces, instructing staff, and posing beside imported ingredients. "Get one of me holding the knife," he said, pointing toward a Japanese carbon steel blade. "Make it look candid." Lucia watched from the doorway, arms folded, lips tight. Then she looked over her shoulder and spotted Mara pushing a cart down the hall. The woman moved like a shadow, unnoticed, unbothered. Lucia's eyes narrowed, and she stepped into the hall, intercepting her. "Mara," she said, "do you need a station for prep tomorrow?" Mara blinked. "Excuse me?" "For the gala. I can have a corner set aside for you, if you want to work on site." There was a pause, a long one. Then Mara nodded once. "I'd like that," she said. The ballroom looked like something out of a royal gala. The kind of place where everything glittered too much and nothing felt real. Staff buzzed through it like ants under crystal, adjusting table cards and testing lighting patterns. In the far left corner, behind a velvet partition near the service hallway, a folding table had been set up with a modest prep station. It wasn't much. A chipped cutting board, a portable induction burner, a small stack of plain white plates. The contrast was laughable when compared to the gleaming stainless steel counters in the executive kitchen upstairs, where Damon's team rehearsed his segment with military precision. Mara stood at her station in silence, sleeves rolled, apron tight. She had a small crate of ingredients beside her. Nothing exotic, nothing flashy, just onions, herbs, tomatoes, olive oil, and a few vegetables she'd brought from her home garden. Atop the crate rested an old steel pan, its surface darkened with age. Its wooden handle was smoothed from years of use. Lucia passed her once without speaking, but her eyes lingered on that pan. Later, backstage in the green room, Damon sipped sparkling water while watching a live stream of the setup on his phone. "Why is she in the ballroom?" he asked his assistant. "Wasn't she supposed to prep in the back kitchen?" "She asked for a quiet corner," the assistant replied, checking her notes. "Lucia cleared it." Damon raised a brow. "Of course she did." Meanwhile, Nico poked his head around the partition, carrying a small tray of lemon cupcakes and an apologetic smile. "Hey, I thought maybe you'd want something sweet after, everything," he said. "No pressure." Mara looked at the tray. "They're beautiful," she said. "Save one for your sister." She's allergic to mango, right? Nico blinked. How'd you? You mentioned it when you made aioli last week. You were worried about bringing leftovers home. He stared at her for a beat, then quietly set the tray down and left without another word. His ears were red. By early evening, guests had begun arriving. Tuxedos, gowns, laughter bouncing off marble floors. Photographers flitted through the crowd like moths with expensive flashes. The smell of roasted duck and seafoam. Reductions filled the air, layered under the notes of string quartet harmonies. Mara didn't glance at the stage or the growing crowd. She laid out her ingredients with steady hands, brushing soil off a carrot before peeling it with practiced speed. She halved cherry tomatoes with a rhythm that was less slicing and more breathing. She was halfway through chopping onions when she heard a quiet voice behind her. You were trained at Livray. Mara didn't turn. I was trained long before Livray. Lucia stepped closer, arms crossed, clipboard in hand. I worked in event catering when I was in college. We serviced a dinner hosted by a French delegation. I remember one of the chefs plated with a spoon, not tongs. He said metal bruised the garnish. I still use a spoon, Mara said, still not looking up. Fingers bruise too, if you don't know what you're holding. Lucia studied her for a moment longer. I've seen people pretend to be chefs. You don't pretend. Mara gave a short, dry smile. No, I hide. The first call for entrance echoed through the sound system. Staff division, please prepare your dishes. Judging begins in 20 minutes. Mara lit the burner. The small pan, darkened with memory, hissed to life as oil met steel. On the far side of the ballroom, Damon stood beneath a spotlight, greeting donors with polished charm. Every sentence was a performance, every laugh perfectly placed. But one of the investors, an older man with a French accent, kept glancing toward the back of the room. He nudged his wife. That woman, he murmured, pointing discreetly. At the small table. I've seen her before. Where? She asked. He frowned. In Lyon. That charity gala. The one where they served citrus-laced duck and a parsnip foam that tasted like spring. She followed his gaze. You're sure? He tilted his head. I'm certain. She was at the head of the kitchen, young, quiet, but brilliant. Meanwhile, Mara placed the vegetables into the pan, one by one. The aroma rose quickly. Browned edges, soft herbs, garlic blooming in oil. The scent was simple, but it curled into the air like a ribbon, weaving past guests and into memories. People turned their heads. One of the hotel's junior chefs passed by and stopped mid-stride. What's that smell? He whispered. Mara plated without speaking. The tomato reduction was rich but balanced. She garnished it with a sliver of lemon zest and a single sprig of thyme. She wiped the plate's rim clean with the edge of her apron. Then she set it down on the judging table. No drama, no flourish, just truth. The judging table was dressed in navy silk and lined with polished crystal glasses. Each place setting was flanked by gold utensils and anchored by folded name cards bearing the titles of food critics, investors, and a local news anchor who fancied herself a gourmet. Waiters moved with careful precision, placing dishes submitted by the eye, staff division in front of each judge. Mara's dish sat among them, humble in color, absent of foam or edible petals, but striking in its restraint. A soft glaze shimmered on slow-roasted vegetables, anchored by a smear of tomato reduction and the faintest lift of lemon on the edge. It didn't announce itself. It waited. The critic from La Vie Gourmande leaned in, frowning slightly. Which station was this from? A junior coordinator flipped through the notes. Back prep table. Submitted under Delaney M. The critic raised an eyebrow. Not a chef? Janitorial staff, actually, the coordinator said, almost apologetically. The judge paused, fork hovering. Then, with a small shrug, he took a bite. Across the table, another judge followed, then the third. A silence settled in like velvet. The first judge blinked. "Excuse me," he said, and leaned over to taste it again, this time slower. "It's confit, but there's a bitterness," the second murmured. "No, not bitterness. Depth." "Roasted shallots," said the third. She sweated the sugars out. "That's not an accident." Meanwhile, Damon Lore stood several feet away, schmoozing beside a pyramid of wine glasses stacked like a crown. A server whispered something in his ear, and his expression flickered, only briefly, before returning to its polished setting. "She's up now?" he asked, nodding toward the judges. "Yes, sir." He downed his champagne and gave a half smile. "Perfect. Let's see if they survive the real thing." Upstairs in the executive kitchen, his team wheeled out the final components of his presentation: Wagyu tartare, pickled quail egg, black garlic caviar, a brass bowl fitted with dry ice prepared to erupt in theatrical fog the moment the dome was lifted. But downstairs, no one was watching the bowl. They were watching the plate that didn't smoke. A soft murmur began among the guests closest to the judging table. Not dramatic, just low and consistent. Confused, intrigued. Two critics leaned closer together, whispering quickly in French. Lucia stood in the far corner, watching it all unfold with arms crossed. The moment was small, no spotlights, no orchestra swell, but it was happening. She could feel it. The older French investor nudged the donor beside him. "I know this technique," he whispered. "That plate was plated with intention. Not dressed, not decorated, plated." "Who is she?" the other asked. "I don't know yet. But that hand, it's trained." Lucia stepped forward. She didn't interrupt, didn't speak, but she moved closer to the judges, clipboard in hand, as if taking inventory. Her eyes stayed on them as they finished the last bite of Mara's dish. The lead judge set his fork down slowly. "Tell me again," he said to the coordinator. "Who prepared this?" "Janitor," the young man repeated. "Get her name." Damon approached just as the next round of applause began, timed, no doubt. For his arrival, the house lights adjusted, the music swelled slightly, and his entrance aligned perfectly with the arrival of his dish. He took his place behind the judging table. Microphone clipped to his lapel. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with a perfect smile, "we've saved the most exciting presentation for last." He lifted the dome with a flourish. Dry ice fog spilled across the table. The crowd clapped politely, leaning forward to see. Damon described his dish with the confidence of a man used to admiration. Wagyu tartare with smoked quail egg, finished with a 24-hour garlic black gel and a yuzu kelp glaze, plated over hand-chiseled Himalayan salt rock. Someone at the edge of the crowd muttered, "That sounds like a dare, not a dish." A few laughed. Damon didn't hear them. He watched the judges take their first bites. He saw the nods, the appreciative murmurs, but none of them looked like they had with the plate before. There was no silence, no pause, just polite chewing. Then the lead judge looked at Damon and said, "Impressive presentation." That was it. No follow-up, no adjective-laced compliment, no poetry. Damon's smile twitched. The scorecards were collected without fanfare. Lucia watched it all unfold, then turned to find Mara standing quietly behind the partition. Her apron was folded, her station wiped clean. She looked almost ready to leave. Lucia walked over. "They're asking for you." Mara didn't move. "Why?" "Because something about your plate made them forget every other course." Mara glanced across the ballroom. Guests were mingling again. Glasses clinked. Music resumed. No thunderous applause, no fanfare. Just the subtle shift of attention, like the tide, pulling gently in one direction. "Let them wonder a little longer," she said. The judges' deliberation took place behind a satin divider near the ballroom bar, away from the cameras and curious ears. No one was told the scores yet. No envelope was passed. Just murmurs, low, urgent, occasionally interrupted by a surprised laugh or a question spoken in French. Mara remained near the back wall, blending into the movement of the staff, clearing half-finished plates and wine glasses. Her posture was still, composed, but every sound, every shifted chair, every dropped fork seemed louder than it should. Lucia returned with a glass of water and handed it to her without speaking. Mara took it, but didn't drink. "Are they angry?" she asked softly. "No," Lucia said. "They're unsettled." Mara glanced sideways. "That's worse." Lucia didn't argue, because she was right. Damon Lore's gala was a controlled show. Donors paid not for food, but for the illusion that nothing could surprise them. Tonight, something had. Across the room, Damon paced beside the wine wall. His usual glow of confidence had started to flicker. His assistant showed him something on a phone, screen, comments from a live blog covering the event. Phrases like "unexpected brilliance," "mystery cook stuns panel," and "better than the showpiece" leapt from the feed. He waved it away. "It's hype," he muttered. "People love an underdog narrative. It'll pass." "Should we cancel the Q&A segment?" his assistant asked. "No. I'll take the mic myself." He stepped into the spotlight just as the event host announced the final segment. "Before we reveal the judge's decision," the host said, "we've invited Mr. Damon Lore to speak about the heart behind tonight's competition." Applause rose like steam, polite, automatic. Damon walked to the mic with a tailored smile. "Tonight wasn't about titles or training," he said smoothly. "It was about heart, about showing that anyone can create something beautiful, given the chance." From the crowd, someone coughed. One of the judges, loudly enough that Damon's eyes flicked toward them. "Of course," he went on, "we were all surprised by the remarkable dish from one of our own team members. Ms. Delaney?" He said it like he had just learned her name. The crowd murmured. A few leaned in. Others searched the corners of the ballroom for the face they didn't recognize. Damon gestured toward the back. "Would Ms. Delaney join us for a few words?" Lucia gave Mara a questioning glance. Mara took one breath, set down her glass, and walked forward. She moved through the ballroom like a current, steady, silent, inevitable. Conversations hushed as she passed. Some people tilted their heads, as if trying to place her. Others recognized the uniform and looked away, uncomfortable with the disruption of hierarchy. She stepped onto the small stage beside Damon, who extended a hand. She didn't take it. The microphone was adjusted for her height. She didn't speak at first, just scanned the crowd, letting the silence fill the space Damon had just used for performance. Then, "I wasn't planning to speak." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I entered because my daughter asked me if I still remembered who I used to be. She's 9. She thinks food has magic in it. And she's not wrong." Someone near the front, a woman in a deep red dress, smiled gently. "I didn't cook tonight to prove anything," Mara continued. "I cooked because sometimes the thing you thought you lost is still inside you, waiting." There was no applause. Not yet. Just breathless stillness. Then she stepped down. Behind her, Damon adjusted the mic with more force than necessary. "Thank you, Ms. Delaney. A reminder that greatness can come from anywhere." Lucia met her near the edge of the dance floor. "You didn't tell them." "They weren't ready," Mara replied. Will you? Mara shook her head. Not yet. The ballroom lights shifted. The host returned to the stage with a white envelope. The judges have asked me to announce tonight's winning dish, not by number or category, but by name, he said. The plate that received unanimous highest score, he paused for effect, was submitted by Miss Mara Delaney. The pause after the name was longer than it should have been. Then applause. Hesitant at first, unsure of the etiquette, but it grew. One of the judges stood and began clapping before the others. Another leaned forward and said something to the woman next to him, who nodded. Damon clapped too, but his hands barely touched. Mara didn't return to the stage. She didn't bow. She just nodded once and disappeared behind the curtain. In the hallway beyond the ballroom, Ella was waiting. She ran to her mother, notebook in hand, eyes wide. Did you win? Mara knelt. Yes, Ella beamed. Did he cry? Mara smiled, soft and tired. Not yet. The next morning, Mara arrived early. The hotel hallways were still quiet, the kind of silence only found before sunrise, before guests stirred, before keys clattered in locks, before the illusion of opulence resumed. The afterglow of the gala had already faded from the air, but the memory of it lingered in the corners like embers. She didn't go to the janitor's closet. She went straight to the staff kitchen. The door was unlocked. The lights flickered on with a soft hum. She placed her bag on the counter and unwrapped a small cloth bundle from home. A folded apron, once white, now aged to the color of old parchment. The stitching along the top corner read Delaney in dark blue thread, nearly rubbed smooth. She slipped it over her uniform without hesitation. Lucia arrived 20 minutes later, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. You're here early, she said. I never left, Mara replied. Lucia walked to the opposite counter, set her clipboard down, and leaned back against the stainless steel. They're calling. Who? The board, investors, press. I'm getting emails asking for interviews with the mystery staff chef. She paused. One critic said your technique was restrained to the point of mastery. Mara sliced a carrot lengthwise, clean and even. He tasted 3 things: control, fire, and garlic. Lucia hesitated. You could leverage this. Step forward. Reclaim your name. I'm not ready. Lucia frowned. Why not? Mara finally looked up. Because they're still clapping for the surprise, not the skill. Lucia nodded slowly, and the silence between them thickened. Neither hostile nor warm, just full. By mid-morning, whispers circulated through the back-of-house staff that the CEO had been outshone, that the board had noticed, that a promotion might be announced soon, though no one knew for whom. In the executive wing, Damon Lore sat behind his glass desk, scrolling through photos from the night before. Frame after frame showed his own presentation in fog and gold. But the photo getting shared online, the one reposted dozens of times, wasn't his. It was Mara's dish. No name, just the photo, no drama, just color and balance and reverence. He stared at it longer than he expected to. The knock on his door was soft but firm. Lucia stepped in without waiting for permission. I assume you've heard, she said. I've heard everything. She's not going to the press. Damon raised an eyebrow. Interesting. She's not interested in credit. He leaned back. Then why are you here? Lucia placed a single sheet of paper on his desk. Because I think you are. He picked it up. It was a proposal, internally routed and approved, with room for a new position. Culinary heritage consultant. The pay was competitive, the hours flexible. It came with full access to the hotel's kitchen network. She didn't ask for this, Damon said. She wouldn't. And you think offering it makes me generous? Lucia smiled faintly. No, I think not offering it makes you forgettable. He held her gaze, then looked down at the paper again. In the staff break room, Mara sat beside Ella, who had the day off school. A small stack of sticky notes lay between them, each scribbled with dish names, written in Ella's blocky handwriting. "Which one do you like best?" Mara asked. Ella frowned in thought. "Mama's midnight risotto." "That's too long for a menu." Ella grinned. "But it's true." Nico poked his head in, holding a battered prep clipboard. "They want you in the executive lounge." Mara glanced up. "For what?" "Didn't say. Just bring Miss Delaney. Now." She rose slowly, tucked her daughter's notes back into her bag, smoothed her apron. When she arrived, Damon was standing near the floor-to-ceiling window, hands clasped behind his back like a man preparing to rehearse dignity. "I have a proposal," he said, before she could speak. "I didn't request one." "No, but you earned it." He turned and gestured to the sheet on the table. Mara approached but didn't pick it up. She read it once, eyes moving calmly, deliberately. "You want to use my name to fix your press narrative," she said. "Yes." "You want to say you discovered me." He didn't respond. She exhaled, then looked him square in the eye. "Only under 3 conditions." "Name them." 1. You publicly acknowledge I beat you. Not just in taste. On every level. His jaw tensed. "Fine." 2. Ella gets a full scholarship through the hotel's community program, wherever she chooses to go. He blinked. "Consider it done." 3. She paused. "I keep my key to the janitor's closet." He blinked again. "Why?" "Because I started there, and people still work there." Damon stared at her, then slowly extended his hand. She didn't take it. Not yet. She turned to the window and said, "Let's see if the board wants to hear the truth." By the afternoon, the boardroom on the 18th floor had been cleared of its usual decanter set and rare orchids. In their place sat a simple pitcher of water, a row of legal pads, and the anticipation of something unexpected. The board of the Lore Hotel Group had convened not for crisis control, but something more unnerving: uncertainty. 10 seats were filled. Most were occupied by men in navy suits, one woman in a silk blazer, and a finance director who had already read the trending article on Gourmet Frontier 3 times. The article didn't mention Damon Lore once. It mentioned Mara's dish 6 times. Her name, twice. Her title, Janitor, 3. Damon stood at the head of the table, Mara beside him, not seated. She wore the same gray uniform, pressed flat, apron neatly folded in her arms. She hadn't changed for them. "Let's begin," said Mr. Halverson, the chairman. "We've received inquiries from the press and from our partner investors. Some are calling the gala's outcome a cultural moment." The room chuckled lightly. Damon didn't. "I've asked Mr. Lore and Ms. Delaney to speak directly to the matter," Halverson continued. "In particular, to clarify what exactly occurred." Damon stepped forward first, voice steady. "What occurred was a surprise," he said, "and I believe it's one we should embrace." He let that sit, then gestured toward Mara. "Ms. Delaney is more than her position. She is—" "I'm not here for a rebrand," Mara interrupted. The room stiffened. Halverson's pen stopped mid-stroke. She stepped forward. "I'm not your mascot, and I'm not interested in being someone else's redemption story." There was no anger in her voice, just iron. "I cooked one dish. It was judged. It won. I don't owe that moment to this hotel, or to the opportunity, or to anyone who now wishes they'd looked closer before." She met each gaze around the table. "But I am willing to work with you." Halverson raised an eyebrow. "Under what capacity?" "As a consultant. Quiet. Technical. I won't pose for campaigns. I won't wear a new title to make the optics more palatable. I'll advise your chefs on methods and heritage. But I keep my current badge. A silence followed that felt like something tectonic. Finally, the woman in the silk blazer leaned forward. Why not accept the elevation? Because I know how quickly elevation becomes erasure, Mara replied. I won because I remembered what they forgot. Flavor is memory, and memory doesn't live in marble suites. It lives in cheap kitchens, in repetition, in burned scars and bent spoons. Someone at the far end of the table cleared his throat. We're willing to match executive pay for the position. I'm not asking for that, but you deserve it. I do, and that's why I won't accept it under a different name. Damon shifted, uneasy. The board members exchanged glances, but Halverson only nodded once. We'll draw up the contract, he said. When they left the room, Mara didn't speak until they reached the hallway. The carpet muffled their steps, but not the distance that had grown between them. Damon stopped near the window overlooking the east side of the city. You could have taken more. I did, she said. You just don't see it yet. Tell me. I took your story, she said. The headline doesn't belong to you anymore. That evening, Lucia found Mara in the back prep kitchen, sleeves rolled up, dicing onions with one hand while flipping through a notepad with the other. You were right, Lucia said. About what? They only clap for the surprise, not the skill. Mara didn't look up. So we make the skill unavoidable. Lucia pulled out a sealed envelope and set it on the counter. From the PR director. He says if you ever want to headline your own gala. Mara glanced at the envelope, then pushed it aside with her forearm. Maybe next year. Lucia started to leave, then paused. Your daughter, Ella, she okay with all this attention? She thinks the word consultant sounds boring, Mara said, finally smiling. So I told her I'm the secret boss. Later that night, Ella sat on the apartment floor, surrounded by construction paper and safety scissors. She had drawn a new restaurant concept. Again, this one was shaped like a spiral. At the top, a rooftop garden. At the center, a kitchen. At the base, by the entry doors, the word legacy was drawn in block letters. What's it called? Mara asked, drying her hands. Ella turned the page toward her proudly. Delaney's. Just Delaney's. Nothing else. Mara looked at the design. Simple, clear, rooted. Too bold? Ella asked. Mara shook her head. Just enough. 2 weeks later, the hotel kitchens were quieter in the morning. Not because people had stopped talking about Mara Delaney. If anything, the staff talked about her more. But because something had shifted. The tone, the rhythm, the feeling that someone was listening now, not just watching from above. Her name still wasn't on the office doors or the kitchen walls, but her presence echoed in the new prep flow, the revised seasonal menus, the quiet, handwritten notes left in dry storage with alternative spice pairings. One of the sous chefs started plating with a spoon instead of tweezers. Another asked about blanching techniques that had fallen out of trend but never out of function. It wasn't a revolution. It was a return. Mara arrived before sunrise, every other day, always in uniform. She made her rounds like she always had. Trash bins, mop, checklists. But somewhere between station reviews and floor scrubbing, she'd also assess cuts, plating temperatures, balance. She never interrupted. She only asked questions. Why this oil? Why now? Why not char first? One question per chef. One correction, if needed. No hierarchy, just precision. Lucia observed it all with quiet satisfaction. It was the kind of shift she knew couldn't be captured in a newsletter or turned into a TikTok clip. It was deeper than marketing, more permanent than applause. And then the email arrived. from a private booking agency that handled corporate retreats for Fortune 500 companies. Subject line: exclusive chef demonstration request. Ms. Delaney, Lucia, brought it to Mara that afternoon, printed and highlighted. They're offering 5 figures for a single evening. Mara didn't blink. Tell them no. You sure? They want the story, not the food. They're offering a kitchen built into a wine cave in Monterey. I've cooked in tighter places, with more purpose. Lucia folded the paper once, then twice, then slid it into her jacket. One day, you'll say yes. Maybe, Mara said, but not today. In the executive office, Damon Lore was reviewing monthly reports when he caught sight of a headline in the trade newsletter he never subscribed to until recently. The janitor who reminded us why simplicity wins. There was a photo attached of the back of Mara's head. Just her shoulders, her posture, her hand reaching for a crate of tomatoes. No face, no spotlight, just reverence. He closed the tab and sat still for a long time, then reached for the intercom. Bring up the internal consultant contract log. I want to review Delaney's terms again. Any revisions? His assistant asked. No. Just want to remember what humility costs. Downstairs, Mara was helping Nico test new marinades for a staff meal initiative. It wasn't required, and it wasn't being tracked. But more and more kitchen hands had started staying after hours just to experiment, not to compete, to learn. Nico held up 2 samples. One soy honey, one's apple cider and black pepper. Mara tasted both, paused. Which one did you build from memory? Nico hesitated. The soy honey. Use that. But the other's more complex. Mara shook her head. Your hand knows what your memory respects. Lead with that. Nico scratched something into his notebook, then glanced up. Hey, you ever think about opening your own place again? She didn't answer right away. Just looked at the worn metal edges of the prep table. I used to think I needed a building, she said. A sign, a spotlight. And now? I think I need people who'll taste without needing to be impressed first. Nico nodded, quiet. That evening, on her way out, Mara stopped by the ballroom, the same one where everything had started. The lights were dimmed, the table stripped bare. It smelled faintly of lemon wax and aging flowers. She walked to the center of the floor, stood still, and closed her eyes. It wasn't victory she felt. It was silence, one that she had earned. A door creaked behind her. She turned. Damon stood at the threshold, hands in his pockets. I never apologized, he said. I never asked you to. He stepped into the room, glancing around. I can't stop them from using your name. It's already out there. I know. You could shut it down. I could. He waited for more, but she offered nothing. I read your contract again, he said after a pause. Condition 3. She tilted her head. The key? I kept a copy. She held out her hand. Then give it back. He pulled it from his pocket. A simple, worn bronze key. No tag, no polish. He placed it in her palm. You keep walking in and out like the door was always yours, he said. She closed her hand around it. It was. A month passed. The hotel lobby now carried whispers that weren't directed by marketing or scheduled press releases. Guests asked to dine, whatever kitchen she consults, though few could point her out in a crowd. Rumors spiraled. Some said she had once been a 5-star executive chef in Paris. Others claimed she'd cooked for royalty and vanished. No one could verify anything, and Mara never confirmed. That, of course, only made it worse for Damon. Every time his name came up in an interview, hers followed. Every time the gala was mentioned, her dish became the headline. Not the rooftop, not the foggy showmanship, the plate. the silence it created, the way people remembered how it made them feel. His marketing team suggested a new campaign, rooted in excellence, a culinary legacy. They pitched highlighting Damon's commitment to discovering internal talent. He rejected it outright. "No more spin," he said. "Not with her." Lucia entered his office later that day, with a folder tucked under her arm and a half-amused look on her face. "I just got off the phone with the organizers for the new Foundations in Cuisine conference," she said. "They want her." Damon didn't look up. "As a guest?" "As the keynote." That made him pause. "They know she's not a brand." "They don't want a brand. They want someone who doesn't need one." He leaned back, the leather creaking beneath him. "Did she say yes?" "She hasn't responded." He gave a low, humorless chuckle. "Of course not." Downstairs, in the staff prep kitchen, Mara stood with a clipboard, watching a new hire practice plating under pressure. He was young, maybe 20, with nervous hands and a tendency to overgarnish. She didn't correct him yet. She watched. The plate he handed her was passable, pretty, but crowded. She tilted her head. "You trust the garnish more than the protein," he frowned. "I just wanted it to look expensive." "It looks afraid." He blinked. "Start again," she said gently. "This time, let the main thing breathe." As he reset his station, Nico walked in with a battered folder. "You've got mail." She raised an eyebrow. "It's the real kind," he added. "Like paper?" She took it, opened it slowly. The envelope was heavy, the kind used for formal invitations. Inside, a letter from the culinary conference offering keynote position, a travel stipend, and a panel moderated by a critic who'd once dismissed her 10 years ago in a one-line review. She folded the letter, set it aside. She wasn't sure yet. That evening, while walking home with Ella, they passed by a restaurant near the edge of the district. New, gleaming, and already filled with people taking photos of their food instead of tasting it. Ella wrinkled her nose. "Why do they all look the same?" "Because sameness is safe," Mara said. Ella kicked a pebble down the sidewalk. "When are you going to open yours?" "I'm still deciding." "Deciding what?" "If I want the weight of a name again." Ella looked up. "You already have one." Mara smiled but said nothing. "Not yet." Later that night, after Ella had gone to bed, Mara sat at the small kitchen table with her recipe book. She flipped through the pages slowly. Some were blank, some were torn. Others had faded pencil notes like "not enough time" or "burn hotter next time." On one page, near the back, was a folded scrap of parchment. She unfolded it. A drawing, crude, made in crayon. Ella's spiral restaurant from weeks ago. She stared at it for a long time. Then she rose. At the hotel, Damon stood alone in the rooftop terrace. No wine, no guests, just him and the city beyond the glass railing. The same skyline that once made him feel invincible now looked like something indifferent, unmoved. He heard the door open behind him, but didn't turn. "Tell me something," Mara's voice said. He did turn then. "Why'd you really make that offer?" He hesitated. "Because the board expected it." "Wrong answer," he sighed. "Because I knew you wouldn't take it unless it was yours to shape." She nodded. "You're learning." She stepped forward, pulled something from her pocket, and set it on the patio table. The gala trophy. She'd never picked it up. Lucia had signed for it weeks ago. Damon looked at it, then at her. "You're giving it back?" "No, I'm placing it where it started." He blinked. "What does that mean?" She turned to leave. "Wait," he said. "Are you going to the conference?" "I haven't decided." "They're expecting a name." She paused at the door. "They'll get one," she said. "It just won't be the one they planned." The conference hall smelled of steel and citrus polish. The sterile kind of clean that tried too hard to feel important. Dozens of banners lined the entrance, each bearing the names of chefs, critics, culinary CEOs, and rising stars from glossy magazines. One banner, near the registration table, read, "Keynote, Mr. Delaney. The return of memory to the plate." The woman behind the name wore no title, no chef's whites, no logo. Mara Delaney entered through the side door in a pressed gray blouse and slacks. No entourage, just a worn leather satchel slung over her shoulder, and the quiet presence of someone who'd once commanded kitchens without needing to raise her voice. Lucia spotted her from across the room and approached, smiling without speaking. She handed Mara a conference badge. It simply said, "Mara Delaney, consultant, no fanfare, no bio," exactly how she wanted it. Inside the main hall, murmurs swirled as people took their seats. Some leaned in, curious. Others tapped on phones, searching for the story behind the name. A few critics whispered theories. No one was certain where she'd trained. Some still believed she was invented for PR. Then the lights dimmed. The moderator stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Before we begin, a reminder. Today's keynote speaker is not here to promote a product, a restaurant, or a media tour. She's here because, as one judge put it, she reminded us that food is language, and silence is its applause." Then, Mara took the stage. She stood at the lectern, hands resting on the sides, like she was feeling the grain of an old cutting board. "I was once told that cuisine is about innovation," she began, "that the future is foam and flame and theater. But I come from kitchens where we didn't perform. We fed, we served, and when we did it right, people didn't cheer. They went quiet. The room stilled. I've cooked with cast iron older than me, with salt passed down in unmarked tins. I've burned onions at 2 a.m. and cried into broth when no one could see. That's the part they never show. The part that shapes the hand, not the headline." She paused. "I've also been erased, not by scandal or sabotage, but by silence. I stepped away because the spotlight didn't know how to follow a woman who chose to start over." Murmurs rippled gently. "But I never stopped cooking. I just changed the people I cooked for. A daughter, a crew of dishwashers, a team of chefs who needed someone to ask why, not how." Lucia stood in the wings, watching with quiet pride. Mara lifted a small folded apron from her satchel and laid it on the podium. "This belonged to my mother. She taught me that recipes are just permission slips. That flavor comes from memory, and memory comes from struggle. That's why I cook." The room didn't erupt. It inhaled. When she stepped down, there was no orchestra cue, just the sound of chairs rising and a full room standing without instruction. Later, as the crowd dispersed, someone from a prestigious culinary school approached her with a job offer. She declined. Another chef offered to co-found a restaurant. She said she'd think about it. Outside, under a slate-gray sky, Ella waited on the bench near the conference building, sketchpad open in her lap. Mara sat beside her and handed her a paper cup of hot chocolate. "Still drawing spiral kitchens?" Ella nodded. "Want to see?" The newest sketch was simpler. One long room, an open stove, a small table by the window. The title above it said, "Delaney's Underneath," in smaller letters. "Rooted, remembered, real." Mara smiled. "You kept the name," Ella shrugged. "You earned it." They sat quietly for a while, just sipping and watching the pigeons land on the edge of the fountain nearby. Mara glanced sideways. "You know, one day they'll stop calling me the janitor who cooked." Ella grinned. "Yeah, they'll call you the chef who mopped." Mara laughed, a full, unguarded laugh. Then she leaned back, breathed in the cold air. and watched it leave her in a soft cloud. She felt light, not redeemed, just known. If you've been with this story from the rooftop to this bench, from the mockery to the memory, thank you. Subscribe, and don't miss our next story. Touch her again. The single mom, warned, and even the guards stepped back. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?